So I take a look at this card, and we got Kelvin Gastelum versus Rakhmonov. Now, we got some very good news. We got some very good news. By the way, don't send this piece to Kelvin. I get nervous when it has to do with Kelvin. And I feel as though sometimes I say things that makes it look like I'm doubting him, which is the last thing that a guy wants to hear. But I don't doubt him. I'm just trying to observe, and there's certain situations that I do like better for him, and I have followed his career from the inception when he still lived with his mother in Arizona. He was 21 years old. And so I've formed certain opinions. And when I tell you that we got good news, we did get good news. We got the fight that he wanted. He's got Rakhmonov. He can burst right back into the scene. He's breaking into a new weight class. He's not going down there to cash checks. He's going in there for a path to the championship. It's the same dream that everybody is supposed to have. Some guys say it, and some guys take action. He's taking action. He's doing everything right. And he's got Rakhmonov, but he's got him in a co-main event spot. Why do I like that? Well, when you're pulling down to 170 pounds for the first time in a long time, it's an energy suck. In front of everything else, it's an energy suck. It's a physiological change. Calorie deficit for about 30 days. Knowing Kelvin, it'll be for about 9 days, but it should be for about 30 days. And you want to know something? 3 rounds is enough. You can't prove your point in 15 minutes. What in the hell is this all about? They used to not want to stop fights. You don't tape the hands, and you don't break it, and there's no rules. And of course, we're not going to bite eye gouge, but everything else goes. And the referee won't ever do anything. There's no time limits, and there's no judges there. And they would do these things. Why? That doesn't sound like a fight. That doesn't sound like a sporting event. That sounds like an LA riot. Why are we doing those things? Got the same answer every time, all the way up the food chain to the executives. Because in real life, there's no judges. Since when? I've never seen a fight where there weren't judges. It was all my classmates. Since when? Where did you get that line from? In real life, they don't break it. Since when? Every single fight I've seen got broken at some point, and the guy isn't happy, and then they go at it again. Like, what do you mean they don't break it? What are you talking about? Where are you seeing people fight? One of my first days of jiu-jitsu class, they were telling me about going to the ground. You don't ever want to go to the ground. You got to knock down on the feet. You want to go to the ground. You go to the ground in a street fight. You got glass down there. You got heroin needles. You don't want to be rolling around in that. You got what? You got a goddamn move is what you got. You got to get out of town if you're somewhere where there's broken glass and heroin needles. And it's possible you're going to get in a street fight. That's what you got. What are you talking about? But I always had to hear these really weird things. You can't prove your point in 15 minutes. Right? Come on. And when I bring you back to this, you have Kelvin Gastelum, who in his last contest let out a sign, a physical and audible sign of relief, and he spoke to that relief. The relief versus Curtis for Kelvin was, if I don't win, I'm done with my career. My job is over. He was sitting on that. He didn't tell anybody ahead of time. Those weren't the headlines. That wasn't the speculation. People like Kelvin, nobody was doing that to him. But he felt it. He could do the math. He could look around. It was a main event title fight, Ultimate Fighter champion, who is now on the undercard. He could look around. He was smart enough to be realistic, and he let out that relief after he won. But he goes from the undercard worried that he was going to be without a job to a co-main event against the biggest rising star in the division. And that used to be a question because it was Chimaev. Just out of popularity, it was Chimaev. All the numbers were a little better for Rakhmonov, but Chimaev was the guy when you're talking about a star. Chimaev left the division. It is Rakhmonov, and now Kelvin goes right into this. I mean, I just can't foresee a scenario where his back is against the wall in the same way. I cannot foresee a scenario where anybody goes into a co-main event against an undefeated Rakhmonov, gets beat for whatever reason. You get submitted, you get fit, you get a decision. Where it doesn't go your way and you're released. I can't see that. I see grace. I see a pat on the back. I see maybe a bonus. I say, hey, stud, you did something no one else was willing to do. And we respect that. That's what I see. I just think it's a very different position. I think that's good news. But I think it's a very good observation that you make as well, right? On this card, just so you do the math, you got Kelvin Gastelum, who was on an undercard in his last fight and thought he was going to be released. He was one judge's opinion away, according to himself, to not being in the sport anymore. He's now a co-main event. The main event is a former champion who's done everything in the sport except main event. I'm talking about Shevchenko. When she was undefeated, when she was streaking, when she was kicking everybody's ass, when she had the belt, she wasn't main eventing. She loses and she falls forward. It's a very important and interesting observation to make. Now, Rakhmonov and Kelvin's got a lot of moving parts. We're going to circle back to this plenty before they go fisticuffs. Before we deal with Rakhmonov, the day before, we got a real hell of a fight on our hands, which is making the weight. But 3 rounds, and in that position, the relief, I believe what would be a relief of knowing you're secure, knowing you've worked your way up the card, right? I mean, that's the way this business works, guys, right? You break in, you start down here, you work your way up the card. But then it all happens in reverse. You go from main event, or you start working your way down, you get released. Right? You can only go so low. All of a sudden, you're not one of the feature matches, but you are at least on the main card. You come off the main card, you're down here, you start jerking the curtain, and you're released. I mean, right? It's kind of like the cycle of life. You were born, your life begins in a hospital, but at the end of your life, you will return to the same hospital. Just the cycle and the way that it goes. And I think that Kelvin is put in a very fond position with some of those stresses off. And some guys, based on level of opponent, the harder the match, the more they're expected to not do well, makes them rise. Kelvin's one of those guys. So, I feel like Team Kelvin got 3 shots of good news today.